right, let's move on to our next speaker of the day without further ado. She's going to be talking about conscious advertising, and this is a keynote which is brought to us by Channel Factory. They'll also be holding a breakout session a little bit later in the day as well. So she's called Harriet Kingaby. She is co-chair of the Global Conscious Advertising Network, which is a voluntary association bringing together more than 70 different organizations, all set up to ensure that industry ethics are upheld. And here she is. So let's give a very warm welcome to Harriet, and we'll be back with more questions after her talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. First off, I'd like to say a massive thank you to NextM and Channel Factory for inviting me here today, and to you for being here quite so early, so thank you. Yes, I'm here from an organisation called the Conscious Advertising Network, and we are actually voluntary coalition of now over 150 organisations set up to ensure that the ethics catches up with the technology of modern advertising. So what that means in practice is we work really hard to break the economic link between the kind of harmful content that divides us, that's harmful to children, that contradicts scientific consensus, and the advertising that we produce and sell. A lot of our work intersects with human rights, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what that really means, about hate and misinformation and the link to our advertising. And I'm also going to put this into context of why I believe that brand safety isn't enough, and why I think we need to think bigger, to think about conscious advertising. But first, if you can bear it, I'm going to tell you a little story. So I'd like you to cast your mind back to the middle of March 2020. And now, this was a really key time in the global coronavirus pandemic. This was the time that we knew it was coming for us. At this point in time, cases in the US and in Italy were starting to overtake the number of cases in China. And this is an article from the Wall Street Journal at the time. If you can see it, and it's tiny type, Dr. Anthony Fauci is warning Americans to stay home. And the other half of the article is talking about the pressure on the New York school system to close in the wake of this potential global pandemic. Important stuff. Once in a lifetime news. Now I want you to zoom out to that article as it appeared on Mark Gulderman's computer screen. In that red circle there, you can see something quite interesting. So this incredibly important piece of news, instead of running with a piece of advertising next to it, which would have ensured the funding of this paper, ensured that its quality reporting was being financially rewarded, we can see this. Brand safety technology and cautious marketers adding coronavirus keywords to their block lists are rendering hard news at an important time unmonetizable. Now, in an age of post-truth, when Lord Putnam last year suggested that we were facing a pandemic of misinformation that was eroding trust in the truth, I don't need to tell you how important quality and factual reporting is. And this is the world we live in. 1 in 3 Americans believes the big lie, that their presidential election was in fact rigged. 1 in 4 Britons, where I'm from, believe conspiracy theories linked to QAnon. And right now, in Sweden, there is a horrible conspiracy theory circulating that involves the kidnapping of children. These are dark times for the truth, and we're causing a problem. Now, at the time, the marketing community was suitably outraged. This is Cannes board member Jerry Dakin entreating marketers to stop blocking the best bits of the internet, or they won't exist anymore. But you can see we've got a problem here. Now, you might be sat there thinking, I tell you what, this is 2 years ago. This is fine, we'll have fixed it all by now. I'm going to disappoint you, I'm afraid. So, fast forward to 2021, and Media Bounty and Check were doing a piece of research. They were looking at the most shared climate content online. Now, this is factual climate content. This is the stuff that we really need to make sense of this huge global problem that we have to fix. And guess what they found? They found the same thing. 70% of safe, factual climate content is unmonetizable through advertising. And why? That's because we collectively are being too risk averse. We're placing climate keywords on our block lists. Climate content is being labeled as brand unsafe. This is the biggest challenge of a generation. This is what conferences like this are all about. And essentially, we are starving this content of funding through our advertising. Okay, that's last year. We've had 12 months to fix this, right? So fast forward to 2022. Now, in 2018, there is an often cited Vice article, an investigation, which looked at the ability of LGBTQ plus content to monetize. And unfortunately, that article found that many brands had words such as gay and lesbian on their block lists. And actually, the findings were quite shocking. 73% of LGBTQ plus content, safe content, was unmonetizable through advertising. So that's 4 years ago. We've had 4 years to fix this problem. So Brand Advance reconducted the survey. And they found the same thing. There had been no change in the ability of this content to access advertising funding. And these words are still on many brands' block lists. That is a whole community of people whose media is being labeled brand unsafe. I don't have to tell you what that means for representation. And the LGBTQ plus community are not alone. We're seeing religious content being labeled in ways that render it brand unsafe too. So this, for me, gets to the crux of the problem with brand safety. It's myopic. We're placing a tiny magnifying glass on an enormous problem, and we're attacking it from a very, very particular point of view. Now, this is huge. This is big global events. This is the funding of the media. And unfortunately, if we are cutting off that funding, we're creating problems. Be that because we think that certain news articles are too crunchy for us. Be that because we have inbuilt bias, prejudice against particular communities. Or be that simply that we are just not interrogating our tech enough. We're causing big problems. And if we continue to do this, we are going to be quashing debate, reducing choice for our customers in the media choices they have available to them, and we are going to be limiting access to quality information. And from what I've just seen, that troubles me. And that's without even thinking about the commercial benefits of these spaces. You know, quality news environments have longer dwell time. We end up with better ad recall. You know, the commercial benefits are there. And the same with diverse content, which enables us to reach new audiences and is more trusted by those that read it. So for me, we're in a bit of a situation. Brand safety might help us marketers sleep better at night, but it's creating nightmares for the media. And we've not even solved the problem of funding harmful content. These are figures from Comscore and NewsGuard last year, which suggest $2.6 billion of our money each year is going to fund purveyors of disinformation. Now, this makes disinformation a very lucrative business, and we can do something about it. One more depressing section, I promise. So, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the content that I really want us to be aware of this year. And apologies, there is a trigger warning around racism in this section, but I think we need to know it. So there's 3 pieces of content this year that I really want us to make sure that we're not appearing next to. The first of which is climate misinformation. If we're not funding the quality information, and yet here, if you can see it at the back, we have 2 organizations which ostensibly are fighting for the climate, inadvertently funding content which works against their intentions. We've got Lush here on a piece of YouTube content that suggests global warming is hysteria. And there we go, Forestry England suggesting that climate change is a new globalist religion. Now, climate change misinformation is becoming more and more prevalent. We have, as I talked to you about the business model, we have certain pundits who are now making a living. They used to make misinformation about different topics, and they're moving to climate because they're seeing it as a new opportunity. We can see our friends at Breitbart here as well, ably aided by charities and travel organizations. I want us to recognize what this is. If you need help, we've created a definition, which you can find on our website. And I want us to be cutting off the funding for this kind of stuff. We haven't got enough time to have these discussions. The second thing that I want us to be aware of is Russian propaganda. We talked a little bit about the war in Ukraine, and I understand that this can be difficult. However, unfortunately, neither Netflix nor this clothing company, or the bathroom company, in fact, chose to be here, but they are, again, inadvertently funding a war effort. We have to stop. My final piece of content is the Great Replacement Theory. For those of you that don't know this, and I'm sorry that I'm meaning that you do, it is a racist conspiracy theory that suggests that white populations are being replaced by non-European populations. It is not nice. It has already been linked to atrocities. So the New Zealand mosque shootings kind of terrorists kind of manifesto was titled The Great Replacement. And on his gun was etched a reference to the UN Compact on Migration. And yet here it is. This is a French presidential candidate pushing this. I live in France. It's on breakfast television, surrounded by our advertising. And here we go, pieces of content from the States, again, pushing this conspiracy theory, aided and abetted by our advertising. Are we really okay with bankrolling content that incites violence? So that's enough of the depressing bit. I hope you see this. I hope you agree with me that it's time for change. I believe it's time. Hey. Thank you. So it's time for conscious advertising. It's time for us to change our point of view on what our responsibility is and what we can do. Much like Spider-Man, we believe that with great power comes great responsibility. Now, advertising fuels the media. It funds the television that we go to for entertainment, the internet that we go to for information, the print newspapers we go to understand what's going on in the world. All of this is funded by our advertising. And the sums are huge. This is just from last year. We're looking at our global market growing to $1 trillion per year. Imagine what we could do if we spent that differently. We used to think that it was our creative that changed the world. Now we know that it's our media too. So, what is this conscious advertising of which I speak? The way that we define it is through 3 pillars. So first up, we have our conscious media investment. And I think you've just heard me explain why this is so important. Second, we have our conscious creativity. And third, we have conscious influencing. So let me start with conscious media investment. This is essentially about understanding the benefits of quality environments. This is about making deliberate and conscious decisions about the things that we want to fund and invest in through our advertising. That might be hard news. That might be fantastic drama. It might be something else. And it also means defunding the bad stuff, making sure that our content isn't appearing next to hate, isn't appearing next to misinformation, isn't accidentally funding organized crime through ad fraud. And it's essentially about doing more good as well as less bad. And obviously, there's a commercial benefit to all of this. I said to you, quality environments mean higher dwell times, better ad recall, and a higher stated purchase intent than the rest of our media. The second aspect of conscious advertising is conscious creativity. Now, this is what advertising does best. It's using our ability to change hearts and minds. Now, this might mean projecting diversity, equality, and inclusion in our advertising, or it might mean projecting sustainable lifestyles, the kind of things that are going to lead us to the Sustainable Development Goals, or our commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement. This is what we do. This is an amazing challenge, and we feel that conscious creativity is the way to reach it. And our third one is conscious influencing. We have huge consumer power as advertisers. We are the platforms, the ad tech system's biggest customers. And if we ask questions, if we create consumer demand, we can create real change. I'll give you an example. This was at the end of last year. The Conscious Advertising Network, a group of agencies, big brands, ad tech providers, and civil society groups, have been talking to the platforms for a long time about climate misinformation. And at the end of last year, we partnered with Google, who had created the first climate misinformation monetization policy. Now, this means that climate misinformation can no longer be monetized with Google products, but also cannot access them to increase their reach. This means that hundreds of thousands of pieces of climate misinformation content have been demonetized, and the world is just that little bit better for our kids. And just yesterday, we welcomed Pinterest, who have just implemented a new policy in this area that goes way beyond anything we've seen before. And this is only possible because we are not just advertisers talking to advertisers talking to advertisers about some of the world's biggest problems. We need to expand our reach and listen elsewhere in order to fix some of this stuff. So there we go, our three components of conscious advertising. And so I'm going to finish to entreat you, essentially. We believe strongly that advertising can save the world, but not if we're asleep at the wheel. So just thank you so much for listening to me this morning. Thank you again to Channel Factory. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Harriet. Let's move over to this area of the stage, so little short me's not standing behind the table. Thank you very much. I think you're the first person that got a mid-speech applause, and great work getting Spider-Man into your presentation as well. So yeah, I'm just going to take a quick look on Mentimeter and see what we've got in question-wise. But in the meantime, one thing that struck me yesterday, there was a breakout session from Greenpeace, and they actually talked about saying that fossil fuel companies shouldn't be allowed to advertise at all in the same way that the tobacco industry used to and is no longer able to. And I just wondered what your perspectives were on that.
So within the definition of climate misinformation that we've put together with a lot of other kind of climate expert organisations, we've got three pillars within that, and one of which is your typical climate misinformation. So that's saying global warming is a hoax, it's not happening, it's nothing to do with us. The second one is about cherry-picking data, and that's something that you see a lot of kind of anti-climate pundits doing. You know, climate change can't possibly be happening, it snowed on Wednesday. And then the third one is promoting false solutions. So these are things that actually look like they might be a lovely, shiny new solution, but if we put too much faith in them, the climate's going to keep warming anyway. And so, for me, unfortunately, what a lot of fossil fuel companies are doing at the moment is doing number three. We're also seeing lobbying, which is kind of moving from a space of climate denial into climate delay messaging. And that's things like, oh, yes, well, we've got loads of time to fix climate change, so let's just kind of keep our oil and gas going in the interim. And that's just not true. And so for me, I think fossil fuel companies could be much better investing the money that they're spending on advertising into actually fixing the problem and sorting out the solutions. So in my mind, there's no room for misinformation. We don't have time for that. If these organizations want to advertise around, for example, behavior change and back this up with transformation within their own businesses, I've got no issue with this. But if we're talking about misinformation, if we're overstating the stuff that we're doing, that I think that's not acceptable.
Okay, questions are refreshing now, which is great. One here, do you see a lot of engagement from agencies at the moment when it comes to conscious advertising? I mean, 70 organizations, but I guess on a global scale, that's still not enormous.
Yeah, so we're up to 150 now.
Okay.
We've got 3 of the world's kind of biggest agencies on board with us. So Group M, we have Havas, and Publicis have joined us quite recently. And so that accounts for a lot of advertising spend. There is a lot of interest, and I think that the media environment over the last 3 years has been complex. It has been difficult to navigate, and organizations are increasingly being asked by their clients to do so. We have a lot of clients who come to us and say, right, we're going to kind of bring our agencies to you because we want this to be the way that things are done. So absolutely, I feel like, actually we've been reactive for a lot of time. We've been waiting to show up on a space that we don't want to be. There are organizations, campaigns out there that call us out. And that's a really uncomfortable space to be in. If you've got an organization coming to you and saying, hey, stop funding hate or sleeping giants have found us in a place. What we believe with conscious advertising is it's an opportunity to be proactive. So we've got these manifestos that agencies can and brands can embed, and essentially that means that you are planning to do better. You're planning not only to, kind of, as I said, fund the good stuff and defund the bad stuff. And I think that's a really attractive proposition right now.
A lot of people asking how this fits into the current situation in Ukraine. This one here says, what role do you think social media platforms play in spreading misinformation? For instance, TikTok. How should advertisers approach advertising in these times of crisis?
So just a stat that always shocks me from a Harvard study from a few years ago. They looked at Twitter, and they looked at kind of factual information on Twitter, and then they looked at misinformative content on Twitter. And they found that the misinformative content flew through the platform 6 times quicker than the truth. Now, that's in part to do with the way that misinformation is created. If you look at a lot of the way it's created, it's often created in a way that's salacious or shocking, designed to get engagement. Let's not forget the business model behind this means that these creators need to be savvy, right? They want to make money out of this often. So, unfortunately, this stuff moves through these platforms extremely quickly. And, I think in the coronavirus pandemic, we saw a lot of the platforms were struggling, but we also saw great movement. So, for example, quite a few of the platforms restructured their search functions so that if you were searching for coronavirus, for example, then you would get a link to the World Health Organization. We've seen organizations do that with, kind of factual links to climate information. And we also we've seen those organizations kind of try and downplay some of the misinformation there so that factual information comes to the top. All of these things are possible, and I think all of these things are desirable when we're dealing with, kind of contentious issues where we need to be able to access the truth. And so I think what we can do, and we talked about the influence that we have, the consumer power that we have, is about asking questions of these places where we advertise. And if anyone's got specific issues, I think we would love to talk to you about them because we have great relationships with the platforms, which have, as we said, led to policy change. So I think the first step would be to doing that media audit, understanding what you're funding, where it's going. I know that can be really difficult in a platform environment, but we can make these conscious choices. And if we don't have those choices available to us, then we can we can kind of come and see us, or band together with others and ask those difficult questions, because we do have consumer power in these situations.
Fantastic. And you are around with practical advice, and one of the breakout sessions will be focusing on conscious advertising as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? I understand it's going to be moderated by Frida Almgren, communications expert, and there'll be more discussions around this topic. Yeah.
Yes,
All
definitely.
right. Thank you very much to Harriet Kingaby.